Get in the game with the college-branded Venmo debit card. Wreck your team with every tap and earn up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash, a new rewards program from Venmo. No monthly fee, no minimum balance, just school pride and spending power. Get in the game and sign up for the Venmo debit card at venmo.com/collegecard. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. Select schools available. Venmo Stash terms and exclusions apply at venmo.me/stash terms. Max $100 cash back per month.
For the News and Observer, I'm Capitol Bureau Chief and Under the Dome host Dawn Vaughan for this latest episode for the week of May 13th, 2024. I'm here today with my fellow politics reporter Avi Bajpai and higher education reporter Korie Dean as we tell you what to expect this week with the General Assembly a few weeks into session now. We're at mid-May already. Korie, as I hope you've been reading all our extensive coverage of the protests at UNC and how that is much more than just protests at UNC, and pending legislation has come out of it. The protesters, of course, were pro-Palestinian protesters on campus protesting against the Israel-Hamas war, which is playing out on campuses across the country. Some of the things that have come out of that are related to it. To start, are this week a mask bill that we'll likely see in committee and maybe to the Senate floor already. Senate Leader Berger talked to reporters after the Senate session on Thursday, and here's what he said about the mask bill and a little bit of the history.
The law in North Carolina for the longest time was that you don't go out in public with a mask on unless there are a couple of specific exceptions. We ended up with a mask requirement that was imposed on us. You can agree or disagree with whether or not that should have been done.
So he's referencing the coronavirus pandemic when there was the mask mandates at all different levels, including from Democratic Governor Roy Cooper, and then the city of Raleigh had a mask mandate later. And then, of course, the original anti-mask law was, I think we know, was the Ku Klux Klan was
from
part
the
of that.
50s, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So people are still wearing them, not necessarily, of course, it's a matter of perception because of any medical or health worries, especially if you're in a crowd outside protesting. And so here is Berger talking about why he thinks it's time legislation is needed about masking again.
It's pretty obvious to anybody who's willing to look that there are a lot of folks that are violating rules, breaking the law with masks on. I'm talking about protests. I'm talking about chasing people around campus with a mask on. I don't know if you can call that a protest or not.
So, Korie, when you were out covering this in Chapel Hill, were masks pretty common? And then what do you think Berger might be talking about at the end of that clip from him about being chased by someone with a mask?
Yeah, I would definitely say masks were not to the exception, I guess. I mean, most people who were part of the protests were wearing masks. Not everyone, but I mean, a majority of people. And I'll add to this that there have been examples, particularly in the fall, this was more prevalent, but examples of, doxing of pro-Palestinian students. I understand that, they do have those concerns. They do ask people to wear masks. Their stated reasons, of course, are related to COVID. They do say, wear a mask for medical reasons. I think there are some underlying concerns that they have. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty common. And as far as what Senator Berger was mentioning about chasing people around campus, I was not at campus at this time, but there was some reporting this week about a rally that some pro-Palestinian students held, asking faculty and teaching assistants to withhold grades. They're demanding amnesty from the university for the students who were arrested, suspended in relation to the encampment protests. And there was some reporting this week that at that rally, when the rally kind of reached its end, some protesters stayed around, blocked some entrances and exits, I believe, to the main administration building at UNC, and then followed administrators to their cars, tried to prevent their cars from leaving. So that certainly could be what he's talking about there.
And then I think we talked about the origins of it, but obviously if someone's going to go, rob a store or something like that, masks are kind of like a given thing that's been for a while that somebody's using to, if they're intentionally, committing a crime and trying to conceal their identity. That's not the only thing that's come out of, the protests, both locally and then at the national level. The Shalom Act is a bill about, I guess, the definition of anti-Semitism. You covered that extensively, Avi, and this. Why do you think this is Speaker Moore's issue, his bill that he put forth?
Well, Moore and several other Republicans who were backing this bill this past week, which is bipartisan. It passed the House by 105 votes for versus 4 against. They have said, repeatedly that they feel that it's time for lawmakers to address rising anti-Semitism across the state. They say some of it is at campuses, college campuses. Some of it they attribute to some of the protests, but I think they're also talking broadly, not just colleges, but in schools. Representative Caleb Rudow, who is a Democrat, he is Jewish. He's running for Congress right now. He spoke in favor of this bill on the floor. He said that he's spoken to several parents and school administrators across the state, and he's heard what he said, quote, shocking stories about bullying, harassment, just like behavior like that, where, kids are being targeted because of who they are, they're Jewish, their faith. There's definitely, pushback against this bill. I was in the committee room when this was being heard. There was a big crowd of people who were there to speak for and against, but there were people who were passionately against it. Some of the main concerns were about this definition that lawmakers want to adopt. So they want to put this definition codified into state law.
And to be clear, this already passed the House, right?
This passed the House. It'll head over heads to the Senate, where Berger talked about, they're interested in looking at it, but
maybe they'll take it up, maybe they won't next week. That's kind of the gist that
there wasn't anything too specific about timing. Yeah. But this is a definition that was developed by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance in 2016. And it's something that has been adopted by different countries around the world. It's been adopted by more than 30 states here in the U.S., but it's not without criticism because, there are people who have concerns that the sort of definition and some of the examples that it sort of carries and includes of modern day anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic sort of speech or political speech isn't just about sort of people expressing bigotry towards the Jewish people, but also political, criticism of the state of Israel. So that was really the sort of the crux of the concern here, the back and forth in committee. Is this just sort of here to support Jewish North Carolinians and have that in law, or is there a chance that it could sort of chill some constitutionally protected, speech about Israel as a country?
And there were a couple that voted against. Why did they say that they voted against it?
Basically along those lines. There's also legislation that Democrats have filed. The Hate Crimes Prevention Act, I believe, is the full title, that doesn't just, it covers anti-Semitism, but also other issues, Islamophobia and some other issues as well. They say that, if lawmakers are going to address, one form of bigotry or something that is a sort of a pressing concern, the action should be inclusive and should cover everything. So
and that's a couple of years. It's Representative Majid. Was he the one speaking on that?
Yeah.
I feel like it was him a couple of years ago. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was him that they had led a discharge petition where they tried to get that to move, which is just a lot of signatures to try to get those in power to run a bill. Right. And it doesn't usually happen. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll talk more about this. And then also with Korie about what this might mean for Interim Chancellor Lee Roberts' future, just kind of the wake of everything going on at UNC. And then, of course, our picks for Headliner of the Week. We'll be right back.
AI is incredible. It can teach you how to fry an egg and even write a poem, pirate style. Yarr! But it knows nothing about your work. Slackbot is different. It doesn't just know the facts. It knows your schedule. It can turn a brainstorm into a brief. And it doesn't need to be taught. Because Slackbot isn't just another AI. It's AI that knows your work as well as you do. Visit slack.com/meet Slackbot to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
You're listening to Under the Dome. I'm Capitol Bureau Chief Dawn Vaughan here with Korie Dean and Avi Bajpai. Before the break, we were talking about legislation around anti-Semitism, around the mask law, and it's a lot of like past and present and future all wrapped up together with issues that always seem to be around. So one thing we had referenced before the break was Representative Majid and the hate crimes bill. I found the story I'd written about that in 2019. That was filed. It was when Representative Majid, this is almost 5 years ago now, was a freshman. And he had filed this bill called the Hate Crimes Prevention Act, which would have increased the penalty for a hate crime from a misdemeanor to a felony, and for the SBI to create and maintain a hate crimes database. Now, the important thing to note on this is that Majid is a Democrat, and Democrats' ideas don't always move ahead in Republican-led legislature, but sometimes things move in general if you sort of overall support it. It just depends on who has the power and is running it. And the Shalom Act, of course, was sponsored by the most powerful House Republican, Speaker Moore, that had some things that other, had aspects of other things that Democrats have put forth together, and then all at the same time. Of course, this is an election year, so that's, part of it is a lot of these bills are messaging, and people hear it, and expect their lawmakers to do something. So that's the 2019-2024 factor. Another timeline thing to talk about is Interim Chancellor Lee Roberts. On the last podcast we had, the one we recorded live with Senators Murdoch and Sawyer, that was the day of the protesters at UNC taking down the U.S. flag and putting it back up, led by Interim Chancellor Roberts, and Moore and Berger had, high praise for Roberts' handling of the flag situation, I guess. And of course, they picked him so that, he did what they, fulfilled the expectations they would have had. And Moore has mentioned Roberts multiple times this past week, too. So, Korie, what do you think this means for Roberts' future? They both, Berger and Moore, support him being the permanent chancellor. Do you think that's just where things are because this is the particular news of the time? And
yeah, just want to be clear. Senator Berger did pick Lee Roberts to serve on the UNC System Board of Governors. That was a couple of years ago, I believe, a few years ago. Roberts served on that board until becoming interim chancellor in January. He had to resign from the board to get that job. As has been discussed, he does not have a background in academia. He was Governor Pat McCrory's budget director, so he definitely, and he's worked in finance mostly, so he definitely comes from a more, business, political background. And, I think it was an interesting scene, with the whole flag debacle. I think it was pretty rare based on, just what I've kind of gleaned from looking at the protests around the country. It's very rare, I think, that the college chancellor or college president is out there in full force, leading the police in breaking up a protest or, leading the charge to put the flag back up. I will let him speak for himself on whether that was, for publicity or whatever. But I mean, I think clearly people grabbed onto that, people latched onto it and see him as, they liked what they saw. Moore and Berger said they liked what they saw. He went viral really on the NNO social media. He has millions of views for the speech he gave after that.
That you recorded, that you were there. So
I did record that.
Multimedia, Korie Dean.
Yeah. And, so I think it was an interesting moment. I think he got a lot more name recognition. And I think the way he handled those things certainly was a stark contrast to how other college presidents have handled it.
What's UNC's timeline for picking a permanent chancellor?
They hope to do it by the end of the year. That was the original timeline that UNC system president Peter Hans gave. The consulting or the executive search firm that they're now working with said at a previous meeting that actually would be the worst case, like waiting until December to do that. So it could be a few months before that. So probably late fall, early winter.
And Roberts hasn't said if he wants the job.
Exactly. Yeah. He has not said publicly. I've asked him several times. He really has only been in this job since January. It hasn't even been a full academic semester yet. And so, he's generally said it's too early. He doesn't know.
And that's about summer break time on campuses. So
Yeah. So I'd be interested to know what he is thinking now.
We need to get to our picks for Headliner of the Week. You can read all of our Fire Hose on Fire Hose Days at the Ledge coverage, including our daily Under the Dome newsletter with legislative happenings and the one I write every Sunday about the governor's race, since that's a big election going on this year too. And of course, the governor is a key interaction with the General Assembly. Recent stories include the chance of a taxpayer rebate that Berger talked to us about in the budget. It's at least on the table. If it'll happen remains to be seen. He also talked about the budget process, saying in the next week or two, we'll see if it goes, quote, off the rails or not. So we'll see how much derailment we're looking at. And then you can also read about Democrats' attempts to move some things in GovOps. So let's move on to our picks for Headliner of the Week. Avi, who or what is your Headliner of the Week?
So I'm going to go with probably the biggest news in the country the last couple of days. That's really, captured everyone's attention, a lot of people's attention. I'm a big hip hop fan. I'm a big Kendrick Lamar fan. There's been this sort of rivalry back and forth, sort of like subliminal shots at each other between Kendrick Lamar and Drake, two of the biggest names in hip hop. That goes back several years, 10, 15 years, but it really came to a head this past week with a series of diss tracks that they exchanged back and forth. I mean, this really began in October of last year, and it bubbled up into like 4 or 5 songs dropping, diss tracks dropping in the course of like 48 hours. And people's minds were blown, rightfully so, including mine.
We have diss tracks at the Ledge every day, but a lot less sonically enjoyable, I guess would be the way to describe that.
And a lot more PG. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe the ones on the mic, not the ones in caucus or something. Not that we're in caucus, but if you want to tell us what's going on in caucus, we're always here. My Headliner of the Week is this past week has been Teacher Appreciation Week. I'm a parent of a high school student. Of course, I obviously was a student at one point, like we all were. So I want to shout out my favorite teachers from my childhood, Mrs. Schaffner, my social studies and science teacher in 5th grade at Westmont Elementary in Martinez, Georgia, Lake Braddock Secondary School in Burke, Virginia. Hubert Davis went there. Just got to insert that. He wasn't my teacher, but I'll give a shout out to my Lake Braddock favorite teachers, my journalism teacher, Dr. McCarthy, my history teacher, it's Mr. Kidd and Mr. Kelly, and my government teacher, Mr. Patchett. So thank you, teachers. I appreciate all that you did for me and all you do for my kid and all of our students in the state and the world, etc. All right. So Korie, who or what is your headliner?
Similarly education themed. It is college graduation season. UNC has graduation this weekend. So does Duke. NC State had theirs a couple weeks ago by the time this podcast goes up. But congrats to everyone graduating. I'll also note, as we've been talking about protests, it's been a season of disruption for college protests. So we're recording this before the events happen. So I don't know what's going to happen, but UNC has put some additional, what they're calling safety measures into place. Congrats to all the grads, and I hope it's a good ceremony.
I think this round of graduates, aren't they the ones whose high school graduation did not happen?
Yes, exactly.
For a bunch of drive-through. So shout out to maybe getting an enjoyable ceremony at some point in your life.
Yeah.
All right. For the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Vaughan with Korie Dean and Avi Bajpai. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
For more from our politics team, subscribe to the News and Observer at newsobserver.com/subscribe. Follow us on Twitter at Under the Dome and NC Insider, and sign up for our weekly political newsletter, also called Under the Dome, at newsobserver.com/newsletters. Thanks for listening.